Mario was probably with me with 2 houses getting kicked in, but the oldest one, Chuck, he was with me maybe with 3 or 4 houses that I had that, the doors got kicked in.
Mario got caught up with me in 2 houses that got raided. Doors kicked straight in, but the oldest one, Juk, he was there with me through 3, maybe 4 different houses where the same thing happened. Doors busted open, no warning. Long before the world ever heard the name Yo Gotti, long before Epic Records, before Cocaine Music Group, before the platinum plaques and the boardroom deals, there was a woman walking the blocks of North Memphis that the streets didn't just respect, they were scared of her. They called her Mama Gotti, and that name alone could shut a room down. And here's the part that'll catch you off guard. According to his own blood, in their own words, inside a documentary the family chose to put out to the entire world. She didn't just get by in one of the roughest corners of Memphis. She ran the whole thing. This is a story Yo Gotti's own people put on camera themselves. Not a leaked tape, not some tabloid hit piece. His mother, his aunts, his late brother, they sat down deliberately and told it straight on record. Because they wanted everybody to understand exactly what this man crawled out of before he became one of hip-hop's biggest independent moguls. And what they exposed paints a picture of a family that had to build an entire underground economy just to survive, turning a North Memphis apartment complex into a full-blown operation before watching it all come crashing down and then somehow rebuilding into something bigger. Legal, generational, more powerful than the streets could have ever handed them. Yo, what's good, fam? We're diving into some real, raw street history today, real family drama, and honestly, one of the most overlooked comeback stories in all of hip-hop. But before we go further, let me keep it all the way real with you. There's a dozen different versions of this story running wild online. People calling her the John Gotti of the block. People throwing around Queen Pin like it's nothing. So today, we're cutting through the noise, separating what's true from what's just internet talk, because this goes way deeper than anything you've scrolled past. This comes straight from the family's own mouths, caught on camera in a documentary they made on purpose, tied to one of Gotti's own album drops. Now don't get it twisted. This isn't some glorified street cred flex either. This is a story about survival first, hustle second, and consequences far heavier than anyone in that family ever saw coming. So let's rewind the tape and get into who Geraldine Mims really was before the internet turned her into a legend. Let's set the scene right. Geraldine Mims, known to most simply as Mama Gotti, raised her children inside the Ridgecrest Apartments in Fraser, North Memphis, straight through the 1980s and into the 90s. Now, if you don't know Memphis history, let me put you on real quick because the context here matters more than people realize. Fraser during that stretch was no easy place to land. Factories were shutting their doors, manufacturing jobs were vanishing overnight, and the crack epidemic was tearing through working-class black neighborhoods across the entire country at once. Memphis got hit especially brutal because of its location sitting right off the major interstate lines, turning it into a real distribution hub for the whole Mid-South, feeding traffic between Texas, the Gulf Coast, and the Midwest. That's not just a random detail, that's exactly why Memphis, and Fraser specifically, became one of the hardest hit zones in the entire city during that exact window of time. Fraser itself had once been a working-class, mostly white area for decades, before white flight through the 70s and 80s left it stripped down aging housing, dwindling resources, a tax base that couldn't keep pace with the families moving in behind them. By the time Geraldine Mims was raising her kids there, Fraser carried a reputation across Memphis as one of its rougher pockets, the same way certain blocks in Chicago, Detroit, or St. Louis carried theirs during that same era, for the exact same brutal reasons. Economic collapse hitting the same moment drugs came flooding in at full scale. So picture it, you're a single mother in Fraser during that period, raising multiple kids, and the honest options in front of you are razor thin, real thin. Entry-level jobs were disappearing as fast as the factories that once offered them. Public assistance wasn't covering what families actually needed. And an entire generation of parents in neighborhoods just like that one were scrambling, trying to figure out how to keep the lights on with almost nothing handed to them. And that's the world Geraldine Mims and her sisters were fighting to survive inside of. Not some villain origin story ripped from a movie script, but a real, documented economic reality that shaped hard choices for thousands of families across cities like Memphis during that exact era. Now hold up before you think this is some made-up internet legend. Let me tell you exactly where this story comes from. In 2016, Yo Gotti dropped his 8th studio album, The Art of Hustle, through Epic Records. Right alongside it, he released a 14-minute documentary titled Born Hustler. He put his own mother, his aunts, and his older brother directly in front of the camera to tell their own story in their own words about those hustling days. This wasn't somebody digging up dirt behind his back. This wasn't a journalist stitching together court records and street rumors. This was Yo Gotti himself, deliberately, choosing to put it all out there as part of how he wanted his own origin story told. So here's where it gets heavy. Check this out. In that documentary, his late brother, Anthony Big Juke Mims, said it straight to the camera, no hesitation. He said his mom was major known across all of North Memphis, and in their neighborhood, she was basically their own version of John Gotti. He said she supplied a lot of people throughout their apartment complex, and that alone earned her that level of fear and respect. Let that sit with you, fam. That's not some stranger running their mouth. That's not a blogger speculating from behind a screen. That's her own son on camera, describing his mother commanding the streets like it was everyday knowledge inside their building, something every person living in those apartments already understood without anyone spelling it out. Now in the streets, reputation is currency. You don't need a storefront. You don't need a sign out front. You just need people to know your name carries weight, that you're reliable, protected, and not somebody to test. According to the family's own account, that's precisely what Geraldine Mims built over years inside Fraser. She and her sisters moved as one, worked as one, and built something that ran on trust and bloodline more than anything else. That's how operations like that survived back then, long before the kind of surveillance and digital paper trails that make it nearly impossible to keep things quiet today. Tight circles, real loyalty, and a name that did half the work before a single transaction happened. No advertising needed. Just people in the building already knowing who handled business and who they could count on. And that's where the John Gotti comparison hits different once you sit with it. It was never really about scale in some Hollywood mob movie sense. Fraser wasn't New York, and this wasn't the Five Families. It was about how she moved through her own community, on her own block, inside her own apartment complex. People there understood there was structure, and she stood right at the top of it. That's the kind of respect that takes years to build in a place like that. And it never comes easy. And like we're about to get into, it doesn't come without a steep price down the line. Now let's talk about the money, because this is where the story gets layered. And it's also where you start to see just how visible this lifestyle really was to everybody watching from the outside, including a young Mario Mims growing up right in the thick of it. Yo Gotti himself has rapped directly about this chapter of his life. On the track Mama, off The Art of Hustle, he lays out the world that operation built. New cars, nice homes, the kind of visible success that never stays quiet in a neighborhood like Fraser. And once real money like that starts moving through a block, everybody sees it. New cars parked right outside the complex, fresh gear on everybody in the family. The ability to take care of an entire extended family's needs without anyone having to ask twice. All of it fed the legend. It made the comparisons to people like John Gotti feel earned in the eyes of everybody watching from the outside. And it set a standard in a young kid's mind about what success and provision actually looked like up close. That's a detail people skip over way too fast. Before Yo Gotti ever saw what real industry money looked like, he saw what fast street money looked like sitting right outside his own front door. That image never left him. He's talked openly about it shaping his entire mentality toward hustle, toward business, toward flat-out refusing to settle for anything less than full ownership of what he builds. But here's where we have to flip to the other side of this. Because every empire built on those streets during that era had an expiration date baked right into it, whether the people running it wanted to admit it or not. And here's the real kicker. The same visibility that built Geraldine Mims's reputation is exactly what eventually brought the weight crashing down on her. The same cars, the same houses, the same money moving visibly through the neighborhood that built her name also built a paper trail. Let me break down what was happening on the law enforcement side during this stretch, because it explains everything that came next, and it wasn't unique to this one family. This was the height of the federal war on drugs. A run through the 80s into the 90s where DEA resources and federal prosecutors worked hand in hand with local Memphis police to dismantle neighborhood-level operations across the city. Memphis had already been flagged early on as a major regional drug hub because of its interstate access. So the city saw an aggressive buildup of joint task forces built to target networks operating long enough to establish real infrastructure repeat suppliers, steady customers, and visible wealth that made certain names stand out. This wasn't some small-scale local effort either. Federal funding for these task forces jumped significantly throughout the period, with cities flagged as regional distribution points receiving extra resources specifically because of their highway access and population size. Memphis fit that profile exactly, which meant operations there weren't just facing local police attention. They were facing coordinated, well-funded, long-term federal investigation, the kind built to construct airtight cases, not rushed arrests. An operation that had built the kind of name recognition Geraldine Mims had. Known well enough that people in the neighborhood were openly comparing her to organized crime royalty, was exactly the type of target federal task forces spent years building cases against. These investigations never moved fast. They built slowly through surveillance, informants inside the community, and tracking money and property over time before ever landing an indictment. That's how operations like this typically came undone during that era. It usually wasn't one single bust. It was years of quiet watching that eventually built into something prosecutors felt confident enough to take to court. And according to the family's own account, and the way Gotti described it in his own music, that's ultimately what came crashing down on them. The operation buckled under pressure. Legal consequences hit hard, and the material world built over all those years got stripped away piece by piece. Real talk asset forfeiture laws meant the government could legally seize homes, cars, and cash tied to the case, completely separate from whatever criminal penalties followed. So it wasn't just an arrest and a court date. It was the entire foundation getting yanked out from under the family in one single shot. The car's gone. The property gone. Every visible marker of everything they'd built over the years gone. Now, this isn't just about one woman losing money, fam. This is about what that collapse meant for an entire household. And for anyone who doesn't understand what that transition actually looks like day to day, let me break it down properly. When a family's entire structure is built around that kind of income for years, losing it isn't just a financial hit. It rewires everything about how that household functions. The daily rhythm shifts completely. Even the sense of identity shifts, especially for somebody who'd spent years being known and respected across an entire community. The way the household handles basic needs changes overnight. One day there's structure, money moving, status in the neighborhood, and a name that carries real weight. The next there's a court case, no assets, legal fallout, and a total restart from as close to zero as it gets. That's the reality countless families who lived through that exact era had to face across cities like Memphis. And the Mims family was no exception to that pattern. And that's precisely the environment a young Mario Mims was watching unfold around him as he came up in North Memphis. The rise, the visible success, and then the fall, all happening close enough that he absorbed every single part of it. Now let's get into where all of this fed directly into Yo Gotti's own rise. Because the streets have been talking quietly about this connection for years now, and it's really no coincidence how closely the instincts line up. Before he was Yo Gotti, he was a teenager going by Lil Yo, dropping mixtapes on the streets of Memphis in the mid to late 90s, building his name the exact same way his mother built hers through local reputation, word of mouth, and relentless grinding in a city that's never handed out shortcuts to anybody. Memphis rap during that era ran on its own ecosystem, built on mixtapes, local DJs, and street-level hustle just to get music physically into people's hands. Before streaming was even a concept, before the internet flattened the whole game, you built a name block by block, tape by tape, the exact same way his mother built hers years before him. He eventually rebranded to Yo Gotti and spent the 2000s grinding through a steady run of independent releases until his breakout moment in 2009 with 5 Star, which pushed him from a respected regional name into a legitimate national artist with real commercial reach. From there, he built Cocaine Music Group, CMG, turning it into a real label, not just a vanity imprint carrying his name. He developed artists, including Moneybagg Yo, into one of the biggest names to come out of Memphis in years, proving CMG could function as an actual hit-making operation, not just a platform for Gotti himself. That roster growth mattered because it meant the business didn't depend on one artist's run. It was building towards something that could outlast any single hit record, the exact way a real organization is supposed to function. Here's the real kicker. Though Gotti's business instincts didn't stop at making hits. And this is honestly where the clearest through line back to his mother's playbook shows up. He's spoken publicly about buying his way out of multiple record deals, reportedly close to $500,000 each, just to keep control of his career and his masters. That's not a small move, fam, not even close. That's the kind of decision that demands real capital and a willingness to eat a short-term financial hit in exchange for long-term ownership and leverage. That's the exact same instinct for control and command that, according to his own family's account, he watched modeled in a completely different context decades earlier inside those Fraser apartments. Somebody who understood that respect and ownership matter far more than quick surface-level wins. Now let's talk about the comeback, because this is the part of the story that truly separates this family from so many others who lived through similar situations during that same era. After her legal battles, Geraldine Mims made a decision that defines this entire story just as much as the empire itself does. She didn't go back. According to what the family has shared, after losing everything that operation had built, she went and took an entry-level job at a local grocery store, reportedly earning $5.25 an hour. Let that sink in, because it's wild when you think about it. A woman once compared to John Gotti himself, somebody who once commanded that level of respect and resources across her own neighborhood, clocking in for minimum wage retail work just to stay on a legitimate path for good, just to make absolutely sure she never put herself back in that position again. That detail matters more than people give it credit for. It would have been easy, on paper, for somebody with that level of established connections and reputation to find her way back into the same line of work after getting out. She didn't take that route. She chose the harder, slower, far less lucrative path, and according to her family, she stayed on it. That choice, more than the empire itself, is honestly the part of this story that says the most about who she actually is underneath the legend. And years later, once Yo Gotti's career was locked in and his businesses were generating real, sustainable wealth, that entire dynamic flipped permanently in the exact opposite direction. He's spoken publicly about taking care of his mother, making sure the woman who raised him and shaped his entire mindset never has to touch that lifestyle again. Never has to worry about money the way she did back during those years in Fraser. Part of how that's shown up is through Pride, his high-end restaurant in Memphis, where reports connected to the family describe Geraldine Mims working a role tied to the kitchen, taking that same energy, that same discipline, that same commanding presence that once made her a known name throughout North Memphis, and redirecting all of it into something completely legitimate, completely hers, completely protected from the kind of consequences that ended the first chapter of her story. It's a powerful image when you sit with it, fam. The same woman once compared by her own son to John Gotti, who built and lost an entire underground operation on the same streets her children grew up running through, now standing inside a high-end restaurant her son built from scratch. Her hustle redirected, her reputation transformed, her name attached to something entirely legal that she gets to be proud of without ever looking over her shoulder again. At the end of the day, fam, this story isn't just about a drug operation or a rap career. It's about what happens when a family's hustle finally finds a legal home to live in. Two completely different versions of success, built by the same bloodline, separated by one generation and one shift in direction. The first version was fast, flashy, and built on something bound to collapse eventually, no matter how strong the reputation behind it got. It produced real money and real status, but the foundation was unstable by design, vulnerable. The second federal attention shifted that way. The second version, the one Yo Gotti built, took far longer, demanded surviving an industry that chews up far more artists than it ever elevates, and required the kind of patience that never pays off overnight. But it's built to last. It's the kind of wealth that funds a record label, develops other people's careers, restructures an entire family's financial future, and lets that same family take care of one another on completely legitimate terms. For good. Gotti's been direct about crediting his mother for all of it: the heart, the resilience, the hustle mentality that carried him through one of the hardest, most cutthroat industries on earth. By his own account, all of it traces straight back to watching a woman command respect and run things in North Memphis, decades before any of this music stuff existed, decades before Epic Records or CMG or any of the business deals that followed. What makes this story hit the way it does isn't really about the specific details of one family's case. It's about how familiar that arc is across so many households who lived through similar conditions in cities like Memphis during that exact stretch of American history. The specifics belong to the Mims family alone, but the broader pattern: fast money built out of limited opportunity, federal pressure dismantling that economy, and a family clawing back on legal terms played out across countless neighborhoods during that same period. What sets this particular story apart is the scale of legitimate success that eventually followed, and the fact that the family chose to put it on record themselves, on their own terms, instead of letting it stay buried. By releasing Born Hustler, tied directly to an album literally titled The Art of Hustle, Yo Gotti made a clear statement about exactly how he wants this history understood, not glorified, not hidden, but laid out honestly as the real foundation underneath everything he eventually built. The mother who once moved through North Memphis, with the kind of respect and fear usually reserved for the city's most notorious names, is the same. Woman he credits directly for the heart that carried him through a music industry built to break people who come from exactly where he comes from. And the hustle that once ran through illegal channels in Fraser now runs through a record label developing the next generation of Memphis talent, and through the kitchen of a restaurant where she gets to work fully legitimate, fully protected, for the son she raised inside that very different world. So real talk, what do y'all think about this one? A mother once compared to John Gotti, now working completely legitimate, fully taken care of by the son who watched her build an entire world and lose it, long before he ever touched a mic. I want to hear it from you. Drop it in the comments. Tell me which part hit you hardest, because stories like this deserve more than a scroll past. And if this kind of real one pulled you in, don't sleep on the next video, because trust me, fam, we're just getting started on these hustle stories.